Also a planned march in London today. Well, for more on this, we're joined by our US correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease. Great to have you with us. Sherwin, I don't know where to begin because since this migration ban, there's actually been another executive order signed. Just tell us briefly about that first.
Well, he did sign another executive order today, Francis, an executive order that essentially deals with regulations. And what this executive order essentially does is it says for every new regulation, for example, at the Environment Protection Agency, let's use that agency as an example, two existing regulations would then in turn have to be rescinded. So for every one new regulation, two get done away with. And so this speaks to a presidency that, or certainly an administration, Francis. I mean, your expertise lie in the financial sector. Imagine the impact of reducing all the regulations that were applied after the recession in 2007, 2008, Dodd-Frank, laws like that. There seems to be a process underway here in terms of this executive order to do away with regulations, and by doing so, you for every new regulation, you cancel out existing regulations. So, I mean, you try and make sense of that.
Yeah, well, let's see the reaction on the markets tomorrow because investors actually welcome that. But today we saw a lot of uncertainty and concern about the first executive order affecting immigrants, affecting people with green cards who are permanent residents. And then we know that a lot of court challenges were held. What is the situation right now?
Well, confusion does reign. I don't think there's anyone that can actually tell you exactly how these new regulations are being implemented, and I think it differs from one port of entry to the other. So let's talk about the court challenges. What we've had so far are 4 federal court justices in New York, in Washington State, in Virginia, and in Massachusetts, basically ordering that people from those 7 countries that you mentioned, I think 3 African and 4 Middle Eastern countries, if they have a valid residence permit, whether that be is a green card, a visa, or some sort of refugee certificate granting them access to the United States, that they will now not be deported, right? But that doesn't talk to the fact of whether they are going to be screened further once they arrive in the United States. It doesn't talk about how long they could be detained. So the next question then is, will there be a constitutional challenge to this executive order? And that's a question I can't answer for you right now. You know, the American Civil Liberties Union has been fighting a number of individual cases on a case-by-case basis. They've indicated that they have serious concerns about the constitutional validity of this executive order. So we're waiting to see if there will be a challenge that could, I imagine, go all the way up to the Supreme Court.
So huge pushback and huge reaction from not only America but all over the world. And you spoke to the United Nations, I believe. Just tell us their first reaction to this.
Well, Peter and Dora stole my thunder a bit there. I was going to refer to the tweet by Zeid bin Ra'ad Zeid, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, of course, a stinging rebuke, calling this a mean-spirited executive order and a waste of resources. We then asked the Secretary General spokesperson. Remember, you know, the Secretary General is at the African Union where those remarks were shared by the outgoing Commission Chair, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, and of course, he is the former High Commissioner for Refugees. So this is an issue that speaks directly to Secretary General Antonio Guterres' area of expertise. So we put it to his spokesperson, and they said they will continue to engage with this administration, that they hope, Francis, that this executive order will be temporary, and that they've been assured by the Trump administration that the executive order will not affect diplomats that work for the United Nations or diplomats that are stationed at the United Nations, including from the 7 countries on that list. It's called a G4 visa. So I think also what we're sensing is a great deal of reluctance from this new UN administration to directly criticize or condemn this new United States administration. I mean, what you hear from officials here is, you know, they've just appointed the new U.S. envoy to the United Nations. We want to engage with them. We want to keep communication channels open. But of course, we've also seen reports that the U.S. administration is mulling an executive order that could reduce U.S. funding to this very organization. So there are lots of things at play here, and I think limiting exactly what people have on their minds and what people can actually say about this.
So, yeah, you're right. Trump talking thunder, but the UN seems to be treading carefully. The protesters were not. We saw rising action over the weekend. We're hearing reports of rallies in London today. What's expected in the US?
Well, I think you can quote me from a week ago. More protests, Francis. On the steps of the Supreme Court later today, you'll see the leader of the Democrats in the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi, and the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York. They will lead a protest against a number of these executive actions, and particularly the refugee ban, on the steps of the Supreme Court. Let the significance not escape you. Tomorrow evening at around 8 p.m. Local time, Donald Trump will then announce his new Supreme Court nominee, and it's going to be very interesting given what happened to Barack Obama's nominee in 2016 that never got a hearing in the Senate, no confirmation done, whether the Democrats are going to employ the same kind of approach. But in terms of what will happen on the streets of New York and around the country, more protests. I think what you're hearing from people on the streets is that this is not being done in their name, that refugees are welcome. I was at a protest in Battery Park, which is on the island of Manhattan, with a view of the Statue of Liberty, the emblem of freedom and immigration in this country. So the significance was not lost on the people there. And I think this grassroots movement will continue to grow because Democrats do not have any power in the Senate or in the House of Representatives. They are all Republican controlled. So I think it's now fallen to these grassroots movements and possibly further challenges in the courts.
All right, thank you for being our eyes on the ground in the US. Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease reporting live for us from the States.